Dad Council. Today we have a little bit of a change up in our lineup. We have Corey Warren from of the Real Iron Dad, and then we have Larry Hagner from the Good Men Project, Michael Mataluni from Kick Ass Dad, and Thomas Pfeiffer from the Good Men Project. So since Michael and Corey are new to us, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Corey, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks. First of all, I'm honored to be here. I run RealIronDad.com, which is a blog that is all about life. It's a lifestyle blog that posts about food, family, and fun, and it's all about super busy parents and trying to help them make the healthiest choices when it comes to food and of course their family and fun. So yeah.
Awesome. Michael, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name is Michael Mataluni, and I'm from Kick-Ass Dad. And Chris and I have been working together for quite a while, and I do some online consulting work, and then my passion is working with kids and teaching them about life possibilities and how to know their passion, purpose, and values.
And Michael and I both work with J40 pretty regularly as well with that Life Possibilities workshop and the Ready for Life process. So. Larry, you want to do a quick intro of yourself in case anybody forgot?
Yeah. So my name is Larry Hagner. I'm the founder of the Good Dad Project. I am a speaker and an author. Getting ready to launch my second book called The Dad's Edge, and I don't really call myself an iron dad. Usually the most running I do in one day is from the bed to the shower. So I applaud the other iron dad on here. Good for you.
As we all do our marathon of life on a daily basis. That's what my shirts say. Training 7 days a week for the marathon of life.
Nice.
Right.
Cool. Thomas, you want to tell us a little bit about you and the projects you're involved in?
Sure. Well, I'm the father of two boys, 12 and 8, divorced, so I have them, part of the time, and I'm responsible for them, as many divorced fathers are. And I am an executive editor at an online magazine called The Good Men Project. We're having a conversation about what it means to be a man in the 21st century. And it's really a fascinating conversation to have because the definition of men is changing, has changed, is changing for the better, and that's really part of what we're here to talk about with the Modern Dad Council.
Absolutely. And one of the topics that we're going to discuss today, or the topic we're going to discuss today, is mentorship. What it means to be a mentor, like as a dad, what our roles are as mentors towards our kids. The difference between mentoring and parenting and coaching, and also, our own mentors, who it is that we look up to and who we see as mentors and how we mimic our lives based upon, the behaviors of those people. So I think I'm going to ask Michael to lead off with this because he's got the whole coaching and everything aspect of things. So Michael, could you kind of share with us your perspective on mentoring and how that relates to parenting?
Yes, I actually have a mentor, and then I have an anti-mentor. So my mentor is Bill Cosby, and then my anti is Homer Simpson. And so I kind of look at that. So I look at my life and my decisions as a parent. And I go, okay, where do I fall? Where do I fall in this decision today? Right? Because none of us are perfect. We all screw up, and it's like, okay, am I a Homer today, or am I a Bill Cosby? And so I always kind of guide from there. So, mentorship is powerful. For me, and I'll keep this relatively short, but my wife and I were foster parents for several years, and we had 7 foster kids. And You know, one of the biggest things you realize when you're mentoring young kids is that most of the time they don't listen to you. Most of the time they reject what you're saying. Most of the time they're not interested in anything about you. That being said, that's all not true. That's what appears on the surface, but what's underneath, I read something today and it was saying that the kid who displays the least amount of love towards somebody is the kid who needs the most. And so it's this idea of even when they're rejecting the mentorship, is being there anyway. And then, you know, we just flew out to Oregon recently and saw some of our foster kids that we took care of when they were like 9 and 10, and now they're in their 20s and they're just doing fabulously. And just the few little things that we planted as seeds for them then, you know, we've seen those things grow in them, and they're responsible for their success. But we are, you know, just planting little seeds for kids and showing them that there is a better way. Just it changes. It's life changing and it's world changing.
Awesome, awesome. Just so you guys know, if you have anything that you want to say, there's a chat. You can go ahead and put a comment in the chat, and then we can chat that way. But Corey, is there anything that you'd like to say as far as, you know, being a mentor or anything like that's concerned?
Sure. You know, with me, I mean, I love, you know, working out, and I happen to enjoy when I'm stressed or when I have a tough time to kind of take a step away and ride my bike, or, you know, obviously sometimes I'm training for triathlons and stuff. But I think that the mentorship for me is leading by example, and I know all of you guys do the same thing. When my kids wake up, they see me all sweaty and nasty from an early morning bike ride or an early morning run, and I think, you know, that's how I lead by example, is you know, actually doing the exercising. But even more than that, the way I speak to them, trying to be as patient as possible, even in those incredibly stressful moments where they're trying to talk to you, to ask for things. It's because, you know, they can't do certain things at certain times. So I try to be patient. And then the third thing that I love doing, and I did this yesterday with my son, he had to come to work with me, and to help them, encourage them to eat healthy foods, I always have them show me their muscles after every bite they take. And I talk to them about how their muscles are growing with each bite and stuff like that with the healthy food that we're eating. So that's my way of mentoring, is by example.
Very cool. Very cool. Larry, you want to go or talk about it?
Sure. So I really like Michael's analogy of Homer Simpson and Bill Cosby. I think that's a good one, because as I think about my days, I'm either going, I see myself going, you know, don't, you know, maybe some like that. You know, so there's maybe some of those moments, but there's also some good moments, and you have to find the humor in them. But I definitely agree with Corey. I think, so number one, the way to mentor is lead by example. And I think when I have this, so when I'm in front of my kids, I always have this perception of me of there's eyes on me and what I'm doing. So I tend to make different choices and better choices when I feel those eyes on me, and whether those eyes are on me or not, I try to make a conscious effort to program myself that those eyes are on me. So what decision am I going to make, and how am I going to handle something? One of the things that we learned, so I went to a Tony Robbins event a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that I really learned there was the training never stops. And I'm sure probably Corey can attest to that. I mean, obviously he's an Iron Man. No matter how many events you do or what you do, the training really never stops. Well, the learning as a father really never stops. So always trying to up your dad game. You know, like I think of this as, you know, an Iron Man, always trying to better your time. You're always trying to take time off your run, your bikes, be faster. You know, just as you need to do something like that, which I think is a great analogy, you also have to constantly up your dad game. And the way to do that is just become a learning machine. And I would say a mentor for me is you know, constantly reading. That's a big one for me, and constantly trying to adapt and learn different strategies to handle different situations.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thomas, you have something you want to interject here?
Sure. I have two things to add that I think build on what everyone else has said. One is when we're doing the mentoring and the leading by example and trying to teach our children to behave in certain ways and to respond in certain situations in the ways that are healthy, we can then reflect back at them when they're not doing it. Because if we do lead by example, we can then say when they're not behaving in the way you want, is that the way that you see me handle that? You know, do you see me blow up when something happens? You know, if I'm behind a car and the person's in the left turn lane, do you see me cursing at the person and screaming, you know, or whatever it is, or do you see me waiting or calmly doing it? So, you know, none of us are perfect in those situations, but when we do get it right, we can then reflect back at the child, you know, that's not what you see me do. That's not the example that I'm giving to you. And then the sort of counterpart of that is that when we do that and our kids start to behave in the positive ways that we are modeling, they will sometimes reflect it back at us. You know, hey, Dad,
Right.
calm down, you know, because that's not what you taught me. You know, so they end up sort of calling you when your behavior goes a little bit off the bell curve because you've taught them that isn't the best way to respond to it. So it kind of becomes a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, Corey, did you have you had something you wanted to?
I do. You know, it's all about stories, right? I'm sure we have a million stories. The other day, we always say, speak to me with kind words and use kind words. My son totally called me out. I said something that was a little impatient. I don't even remember what it was, like, put on your pants now, son, or something like that. And he was like, I will do it, Daddy, but you don't have to scream at me. And, you know, it's exactly right. And he's 3. He's 3 years old. And they see that behavior, and they call you out on it. And, you know, I'm lucky in that situation where my son is able to do that. And I caught myself and said, you know what, I'm sorry I talked to you that way. And it works, you know, especially when he's in daycare right now. Of course, sometimes if he can't share a toy or somebody's not sharing, he might, you know, get a little physical. And so we try to talk about that. My son's very physical in the sense that when he's upset, he stomps his feet, and when he's crying, he's the loudest crier in the world, and he'll hit something, you know. So we're trying to help him cope with those feelings, and the way we do that is just bring him in closer. Way to mentor as well, is coach them through their feelings, help them understand why they're feeling a certain way to help them resolve whatever issue they're having.
Nice. Michael, did you?
Yeah, I had a couple quick stories to add to Corey's experience there. You know, it's this idea that, you know, we expect certain things out of our kids that we're you know, unwilling to do ourselves. So I'll give you a very stark example. Something that happened to me about a year ago, and I was walking into. I hear my kids fighting. I have twins. They're 11, boy and a girl, and I hear them fighting. And I walk into the room, and my daughter is literally on top of my son with hands strangling his neck, like they're just.
Oh, no.
And he's like doing this, right? She's doing this, and I'm like, you stop it right now! I don't give a F. There's no violence in this house. And I'm like, I lost my head. And so, you know, and then I'm going, wow. So basically, so what I taught her in a situation where you lose your cool, I didn't I didn't physically grab her like she was grabbing him, but it's still the same emotion. Like I'm still giving into the same emotion and losing control and not holding it together so that I could be that calm presence. And the other story I had quickly is this other idea, because sometimes kids are real little, so it's like you've got little ones like 2, 3-year-olds, and you know, it's sometimes being calm and rational doesn't get their attention when they're about to run in the street. And so we have to think about those things. There's no black and white rule here. Sometimes, you know, it depends on what kind of father you are, what kind of parent you want to be. But there's times where you got to yell to get a 3-year-old's attention when they're about to hurt themselves. So there's a dichotomy there that we have to be aware of.
Absolutely, Michael. Those are such great examples, because to start with your second one, I think we all need the dad voice. You know, the voice that says, you need to take me seriously right now. And it doesn't necessarily have to be shouting, but it has to be said with a certain kind of authority so that they know you're not kidding around. But I've been in that situation too, where my two boys, who are 4 years apart, the older one will be going after the younger one, or vice versa, and that's a trigger for me. I have the same reaction you do. Get off your brother, and so no violence, but then I'm almost feeling that. But what I've then done, and I've had some positive results with this, is after everything calms down to go back to them and say, guys, I want to explain to you why I reacted that way. Dads feel very protective about their kids. So when I see one of you in trouble, when I see one of you about to get hurt, it pushes a button in me. And I start to lose it. I feel like I have to jump in and be protective. I would do it if anybody was doing that to you. So, so when you're doing that to your brother, you're triggering this response in me, and that's why it's important for you not to do that, because, you're pushing a button that I have difficulty controlling as a dad.
So I just sent a message to the boys, to you boys, letting you know that one of my all-time greatest moments was screaming, "There's no screaming across the house!" To my daughter, who was screaming across the house. So it's like a perfect example,
Right.
Or stop yelling, It's great. It's great.
Well, I think one of the key points in all this, though, is that we all lose it at some point, right? We all do that. We all come from the wrong point, or the wrong place, and instead of beating ourselves up over it, it's about that forgiving ourselves, and like you said, Thomas, having that conversation with our kids, saying, "Look, I'm human too. I screw up. I make mistakes, just like you screw up and you make mistakes.
Right.
The only thing is, I get to call you out on your mistakes. You don't get to call me out on mine."
That's right.
Just know that as a parent, you're going to make mistakes. Forgive yourself, and have that conversation with your child to let them know, look, I make mistakes too. I'm sorry that I made the mistakes. And, being the dad to apologizing to your kid, that's a big deal. That's a big deal to your child when you can apologize to them for your mistakes. And that's just creating that much more of that mentoring, what's the word I'm looking for here, Michael? Help me out. That mentoring...
leading by example.
Yeah, leading by example. Michael always has the perfect words for me. He helps me in that area. So, Larry, you got something you wanted to chime in on?
Yeah, I did. So I think that they're all really good examples. I can't believe you guys lose your temper like that, because with 3 boys, I'd never lose mine ever. So I just need to make sure there's none of my kids in the background here to wrap me out. Obviously, I'm totally kidding. So I think we all have our moments, and here's the thing too. If you are, for instance, Corey, he's, Iron Dad. So obviously, you're someone who's in the dad spotlight. Chris and Mike, kick-ass dad. You're in the spotlight. You write about it, blog about it. You have shows about it. Thomas, you run the online magazine, which, by the way, is I love that website, the Good Men Project. So you're constantly immersing yourself into writing about and reflecting about those good habits and those good things to do. So when the 5 of us have a bad moment, sometimes I think we have a tendency to, I know I do anyway, I'm like, okay, I write about this, I blog about this, I teach a Dads with Purpose workshop, if I teach other men to do this better, and yet I can't do it myself in this moment. What is wrong with me? You know what I mean?
Right.
Totally understand.
But I heard such a really, men are visual, right? We're pretty visual creatures, so like a lot of times, sometimes a certain visualization can really hit home with us, and I was fortunate enough to hear something that really struck home with me, and it's be the captain of the ship. And when I first heard the sentence, I was like, I don't understand what that really means. So the person that I was speaking to is, be the captain of your own ship, and be the captain of your own ship in your house. So imagine yourself on a cruise, or imagine yourself on a boat. The boat hits something and begins to sink. Now, if you had the captain of that ship completely freaking out, screaming, yelling, freaking out. We're all going to die. What are we going to do? Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? But if you had a captain that was, okay, everyone relax, everyone's going to be just fine, here's our evacuation plan, here's how we're going to get in the lifeboats, and everyone's going to be just fine. And suddenly the people around you will reflect that same behavior as well, because the more we act out as dads and the more we act out as captains of our own ship, that's contagious, right? I mean, I think when we yell, it makes things around us, a bit more chaos. However, I completely agree with Thomas that there definitely is a time and a place where a dad, for lack of a better word, a dad has to have a bit of a bark, because sometimes there are, I mean, it's not like you're going to be like, hey, yeah, excuse me, there's a car coming, you might want to get out of the street. That's just not going to work. Sometimes you do have to use that sense of urgency. So those were my thoughts.
Larry, that's such a great example with the we're all going to die thing, because it reminds me of a camping trip I was on when I was a kid. We were up in northern Wisconsin, and a bunch of the campers got separated from the counselors, and this one kid started freaking out. We were maybe 6th grade, 7th grade, somewhere in there, and he starts screaming, "We're all going to die! We're all going to die!" And I looked at him and I said, "Okay, we've got the food pack, for one thing. So the counselors are not going to, they're going to come find us because they're not going to starve, and we also have the map." So, it was just like sort of looking at the situation rationally and trying to calm it down. But that's what leadership is about. And then I think, maybe we can bring this a little bit from mentorship into leadership, because the two things are related. And what you're really talking about is displaying leadership in those situations, displaying the quality of being in charge, and taking charge of the situation in a positive way.
Yeah, that's huge.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I had a couple things to say on that, because I really liked your Larry, your analogy for the captain of the ship. I was kind of I kind of rejected all roles there for a while when I was growing up. I said, you know what? I just do what you want, be who you want. Men, women, we're all equal. Just be, right? And in a family, somebody's got to take the lead. Somebody's got to be the captain of the ship. And maybe in a certain family, it's the wife, and that's okay. But from my perspective, and the family that I live in, that's me. And because I have this tendency to, and Chris knows this, that I like to take control of things. I like to take the wheel. And so, yeah, what? Right. So, I've always been like, okay, that's a trait that I need to suppress. It's something that I need to, it's a bit controlling. I need to stop doing that. And to a certain degree, yes. But to a certain degree, that's called leadership. And so, embracing that about ourselves as men and saying, you know what? We're all leaders. We have to lead by example, and this idea of mentorship is this ability to lead. And to your point, Larry, when the ship's going down, will you please batten the hatches doesn't work. Batten the hatches right now, and sometimes that just has to be.
And you're setting the tone within your household too. We talk about this a lot on Kick-Ass Dad, Michael, like having the family meeting. So you're setting those expectations. This is what we expect in this house. I've heard it called house branding. So these are the brands in this house. This is the Eischen household, and this is what the Eischen household expects. So you set those expectations, and then follow through with example. So.
Yeah.
And I think there's another thing to add to that, which is that, we also want our kids, as they grow up and get into middle school and high school and become older, we want to make sure that they come to us with their issues and their problems and their areas where they need advice and where they need the kind of leadership and mentorship that we can offer them. So I think it's really important to combine that authority and that being in charge with a measure of availability, and particularly, if a kid comes to you and he or she has done something wrong, and they're actually coming to you and admitting it or telling you that they got in trouble in school, whatever it is, to be able to, and it's hard, to step back, not react with "you did what," and just kind of process it and try to help your child through that, because keeping that line of communication open is really what enables you to shape and make sure that they can walk through those situations in ways that are healthy for them. So we want them to respect our authority, absolutely, but we also want them to feel that they can come to us with a problem or a situation, and after we've bitten their head off, know that we're going to put it back on the neck and actually talk to them about what's going on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's huge. I mean, I always felt emotionally distant from my father. Like he was, it was like walking on eggshells, and it was very difficult to have any sort of conversation because I just didn't know how he would, it's just like, like I'll deal with this because rather than piss off the dragon, like I'll just figure it out. And so, I don't want that for my kids, and I do want them to, and it's like this it's this delicate balance of being the leader, being respected, being in charge, and then but getting on the ground and rolling around and laughing and giggling and being very approachable and emotionally available.
Yeah, Michael, I agree, man. When one of my kids, if I ask them to tell me if they did something, for instance, Roger, my son, whenever I pick him up, I always check in with him and just see if he took a nap for the day, and it's really so I can tell what kind of kid I'm going to have for the rest of the night, right? So I'll just check in. I'll be like, so Raj, buddy, did you take a nap today at school? And at first, when I started asking him that, he would hesitate and think, am I going to tell the truth or not? And that's where you're like praying as a parent. You're like, please, just tell the truth. Please, please, please. And so he did the first time, but then he told a little fib the second or third time. And I think that having that trust with your child where they feel comfortable telling you the truth, whether they did wrong or right, is so important. And to catch it right before it starts, right? Like if they do happen to fib, talk to them and reassure them and let them know it's okay. I know that it wasn't the best choice, but it's okay to talk to me, because I don't know if any of you guys, well, Michael and Thomas, you guys, I think you have almost teenagers, right?
Yeah.
Well, I have 11-year-olds.
So, when they become teenagers, we want them to still be able to talk to us when the issues become huge, sex, drinking, stuff like that. I want my son to be able to feel like he can talk to me about those things and not worry about, his dad freaking out on him, which, Michael, I had a very similar situation. My dad was not emotional at all. I tried to pull it out of him, too, because I was like a theater guy. I have a theater degree, and I would always try to pull it out, like, Dad, how are you feeling? Let's talk about this, man. And he'd be like, Corey, I'm busy. I gotta watch, Alabama games on, Corey. I'm too busy right now, And that's, I do a good impression of my dad. I have to do one for you guys later, but no, I completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's that balance where they have to know that you're on their side and watching their back, but also that you're checking on them, and trust, but and applying trust but verify. So one little strategy that I'll use with my older son is, if he tells me something and I'm a little suspicious of it or whatever, I might ask him, okay, so if I called your teacher and asked her, if I emailed your teacher and asked her if that's actually what happened, would she respond that that's really, what happened? Well, so then it's you're not calling him a liar. You're not saying, well, you're not shaking your finger, but you're saying, you know what? I'm the dad. I have the ability to go out and verify this thing that you're telling me, so I'm giving you an opportunity to change your story before it escalates to the next level.
I'll let you go, Larry, but I just had to comment quickly. Trust and verify. That's a Reaganism, isn't it?
It is.
Showing your age, Michael. Go ahead, Larry.
So it's funny. I've never met Roger Corey, but I think I just saw exactly what he looks like because I think he almost the perfect impression of the eyes, and I mean I think I see those eyes in this house quite a bit. But I'll share a humbling story with you guys right along these lines. It's not a proud moment of mine, but I hope in a way it's a good example of for some of our listeners. So I have a 6-year-old, and my 6-year-old has had accidents in his pants here and there, and one of the things that I would do, and I'm ashamed to say it, but at the same time it was a learning experience, is I would get upset because in my mind I'm like, you're 6, that we probably shouldn't, and what I mean by that is it wasn't just, there'd be a string of accidents, so I would get upset. I wouldn't scold him, but he knew I was frustrated with it, and I let him know that I was frustrated. I'm like, hey, look, you're 6 years old, you shouldn't be doing this anymore. It's just something we just don't do. If you have to go to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom. You do not. So it was a reprimand. So he taught me an interesting lesson here recently. He just last week he had an accident, and I went into his room, and he was changing his clothes, and he looked at me like he had done something terrible, and I was like, hey, what are you doing? He's like, I'm just changing my clothes, and I was like, well, what are you changing your clothes? He's like, I don't know, probably like Roger. He's like, I don't know, I'm just changing my clothes, and so I went into his bathroom, and he had taken his underwear and he threw them away because he didn't want us to find it. So I was like, it was terribly, terribly humbling as a parent, because I'm like, you know what? That's my fault. That really is my fault, because you know what? Yes, he's 6, but he's also 6.
Right.
So I went up to him and I apologized and I said, look, I want you to know from here on out that it's okay to have an accident. If you have an accident, that's fine. I will never, ever be mad at you. I will be more hurt if you don't tell me. And the fact that you tried to hide your underwear in the trash can concerns me more, because now you feel like you can't come and talk to me because I'm going to get mad. From here on out, I'm not going to get mad at you, because I want you to feel that no matter how bad something is, you can come and talk to me, and I might be disappointed, but I will not get mad at you. And it was just such a humbling, because I sat there and I really scratched my head, and I was like, okay, fast forward 10 years from now when he's 16 and the consequences are something completely different and way more severe, and he doesn't have the comfort to come talk to me, that's a serious problem. I need to instill that now. And that's all I had.
Yeah, that was powerful. I mean,
Yes.
You want to add to that, Michael?
Yes. So I'm embarrassed to say this, but I was that kid that peed his pants I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old, and I did the same thing. I would hide it from my parents, and I remember this, and I remember the shame around it, and I remember also being a teenager and being the teenager that would never go to their parent, my father, for anything either.
And then yesterday, you had that one accident yesterday.
And then yesterday, my wife scolded me for peeing in my pants. But to your point, Larry, it's powerful. And when we shame our children, then they don't trust us. And it's like, shame is probably one of the most damaging ways to discipline a child.
So when we're talking about, mentorship, I guess I'm trying to get to the root of all this, right? So you're leading by example, you're making mistakes, but part of that leading by example is having that dialogue with your kids and saying, I'm sorry that Michael, you got me. I'm sorry, but I make mistakes, and this is how things should be. Let's get this dialogue going. Let's keep that conversation between us open. And if we don't do that, then it creates that gap and that lack of communication, right? And that maintains throughout the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Yep, and going back to this idea of shame, when if you say to a kid, either I'm ashamed of you or you should be ashamed of yourself or whatever it is, which I don't ever recommend, saying to a child, what happens is that's when we're making it about us and not about them. Like, I'm ashamed to have a 6-year-old who peed in his pants, or I'm ashamed to have a kid. It's like, and then to step back from it and say, wait, this is not about me. This is about my kid, and my kid is having an issue or whatever it is, and it's really not about my feelings. It's not my problem. I'm not the one who has the problem, and it's something I need to help my kid with. So to depersonalize it, I think, is a way to help get out of that feeling of shame and make it about just dealing with the issue.
That's a super point. Chris and I talk about that all the time. It's this idea that we parent our kids based on what other people think about our children. Like, dangerous.
Yeah,
Right.
because that's not doing them any good.
Absolutely. So, just another quick example. Like, if I'm in a restaurant with my kids and they're acting out, I try not ever to make it about, those other people. I might say, the other people who came here didn't come here to listen to to your loud behavior. To try to teach them, I have this thing with my kids called the Civilized Children Project Civilized Children, to teach them how to behave in public places. But it's never like, I'm ashamed of how you're behaving in the public place. But what I will do is I'll say to them, you know what, guys, I didn't go out to dinner with you to have this whole experience be about my correcting your behavior. I went out to dinner with you so that we could talk and have a conversation and be with each other. So please don't make this about, my having to step in every 5 seconds and stop you from fighting with each other or pouring salt or sugar all over, or whatever it is that kids do. Let's try to have a decent time together. So, again, as kind of a tactic, if you can bring the focus back to, instead of what other people are thinking about the interaction that you're having with your kids in a public place, think about the interaction that you want to be having with your children and try to bring the focus back to making it what you want it to be.
The direct route.
Hello, Modern Dad Council. This is Tommy Maloney with my very good friend and head coach, Scott Moreau. Hello. Today's topic, we're talking about mentoring and coming from a dad's point of view. And again, we're talking about mentoring as far as a dad's point of view. What are your thoughts on not only being mentored or mentoring as well, being a dad?
I think for me, my dad was a big influence growing up. He, whether it was school, sports, and church, it was all, it was a big influence. I wanted to be, my dad was a hard worker, and so for me, it was important to instill the same things to my kids and mentor them, and I think the biggest thing I try to do is remember that my kids are individuals. I don't own them. I think a lot of times parents, treat kids like property versus you're there to make them a little better than you, right, and mentor them and teach them that once they get on their own, they can do it themselves and not to always rely on your parents. And I think that is it's very important. So that way they go, when they're 18, it's the confidence that I can do this. It doesn't mean it's easy, but we all probably remember when we said it to our kids, words that our dads said to us. and it's a tough day, but it's a great day all at the same time.
Now, because you and I are both in similar situations, and a lot of our viewers and listeners are also what I like to call bonus parents, how do you, as a bonus dad, how do you instill mentoring with your bonus kids?
I think it's much the same as your own as far as consistency. I think you have to believe in what you're doing is right, and always keep, putting the kids first, and always remember everything is that life lesson. And the difference is usually the discipline type of areas, you have no control over, which is fine because it shouldn't come down to that. I think in my case, I just try to be the positive role model, the same person that I am with my kids, and understand that it is we're a family,
right?
And number one, and that it doesn't matter, whose kids, quote unquote, they are. We are family in that. If I'm consistent with my kids, and then my bonus kids, that they see that the right way to do things, and because I think a lot of times when it comes to bonus kids, both directions, they don't know where they fit in. I know. Well, my sons, sometimes they don't want to be jealous. Like if I'm spending a lot of time with the bonus kids, and it goes back and forth.
Right.
But I think at the end of the day, as long as I'm consistent, everybody understands. I'm putting them first, and then us second.
Now, the name of our show is called Modern Dad Council. How would you describe yourself as a modern dad today?
Well, I think, when it comes to, I think modern dads are more involved. It's no longer I go to work and the wife stays home and takes care of the kids, takes care of the school, the cooking, and you're definitely more involved. So you're going to work, you're coming home, and in our case, it's coaching the hockey, and you're in there, and at home you're helping clean, you're helping cook, you're helping around the house. And I think that's what the modern dad has had to really evolve into, is being more well-rounded.
Right.
Being able to do it all, and versus just being, giving orders.
A lot different than, like you were talking earlier about your dad.
Oh yeah, my dad would come home, and
was it dinner had to be on the table by?
Yeah, I hate to say expected dinner, but
right.
That's what it was, and it wasn't that he felt, it wasn't his job. It's just that's the way he was raised.
Right.
That's the way society was, and it's definitely changed where, it's, but the difference too is everybody works in the household now too. So I think you share responsibilities, and in that I think it gives us a good opportunity to be super dads, where we can show that, and it's not about us, it's about showing them that, hey, you can work, and showing them the hard work, you just keep going, and that the kids are worth all that time and energy spent, and the family is, you're putting your own things aside for everybody else. And it's important as well to have your own time, and like in my case, riding a bike. I think my kids see how hard I work at it, and the nice part there is it's not about a competition against anybody else. It's just about me taking care of myself,
right.
And that's what I want them to see is, as you get older, it's important, just like when we say you need to do, be outside and be active, we're being that same example.
I just wanted to say, because Scott and I do coach hockey, we just came back from what we call dry land. So after our practices, we go outside, we do running, we do things like that. And I think you got a great point there about being a modern dad, is that we as modern dads, we need to walk the talk even more than our dads did. I mean, especially with, like you were saying, life lessons. I mean, this is a life lesson in itself. Well, Scott, thanks for your time.
Is there any other topics or as far as mentoring goes that anybody wants to make? Michael?
Yeah, I had a quick final thought. Jay40's not here today, so I'm going to speak for him. Jay always talks about this idea of coaching versus mentoring. So there's parenting, which is what we were talking about earlier, which is this idea of don't go in the street, don't touch the hot stove, that's parenting. And then there's coaching, which is this idea of okay, you're talking to your kids, you're asking great questions of them, you're helping them come up with their own solutions, you're giving them opportunity to be acknowledged, to be validated, to be understood, right? It's a Stephen Covey principle, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Same goes for kids of any rational age. And then you have mentoring, and the mentoring is now they feel validated by you, they've come up with their own solutions, and they're also looking to you. What are you doing? What are you showing? What are you creating in the world? And so, it's really interesting. I love this thought of mentoring in this conversation, because I find it fascinating how kids look up to people. And it's like, you have kids that are raised with victims. You see these kids coming out of in their adulthood as victims. You see children being raised by parents who are empowered. You see kids coming out of childhood empowered. And so if we're trying to get our kids to be things that we are not, that is the long way around, my friend. It's very, very difficult. It's like that. Do as I say, not as I do. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I heard that growing up. Do as I say, not as I do. And I was like, but now I'm just going to do what you do, but I'm not going to tell you. And that's what I did.
Or when the kid says why, and you say, because I said so. That's why. Like, wait a minute.
Right.
I've used that plenty of times. I'm not going to.
Yeah. Bye-bye. We all have.
And maybe for one of our next episodes, the whole idea of empowerment is so powerful. How do we empower our children, to have the strength and courage to act in certain ways, to exercise good judgment, to not to let themselves be victimized in certain ways. How do we give them that power? Because often when we're in that parenting role, we're cracking down on their power. We're saying, you don't have the power to talk to me that way. You don't have the power to treat me that way. I'm the dad. You're the kid. So there's, I think, how do we walk the line of the natural and necessary power imbalance in the father-child relationship to then empowering this child to self-define and stand up for his or her own rights and do those things that in some ways we don't always like it when they do it, in their interactions with us.
Absolutely.
Powerful. Great point.
So who are some of your, could we go through the list? Like, Corey, I'll start with you. Who are some of your mentors, or who are some people that you read or watch or look up to that kind of help you through your job as a dad?
Wow. My dad, people that I look up to, that is a great question. You have stunned me a bit, because all of my folks that I look up to are like all these super big triathletes and fitness people. So okay, here's the one of my number ones. Andrew Saul is the self-coined mega vitamin man, and this man raised both of his children without ever taking them to the doctor from 0 to 18 years old. And he believes in vegetable juicing and vitamin supplements and all that other kind of fun stuff. And that's who I would say I look up to. There's also other dads out there like Caldwell Esselstyn, Rip Esselstyn's father. Rip Esselstyn runs the Forks Over Knives program. You might have heard of that documentary. It's like the #1 documentary on Netflix for the last 3 years. And Rip was a triathlete, and now he does the Engine 2 diet, but his father, Caldwell Esselstyn, does more heart bypass surgeries than anyone in the entire country at Cleveland Clinic, and he's one of the only doctors that heals people through vegetables. So, hey, this is becoming all about vegetables and eating healthy now that I'm talking about that, but that's who I look up to, those kind of people, so I nerd out over healthy eating and, plant-based diets.
Cool. What about you, Larry? Do you have some people that you particularly follow that have helped you along your path?
Oh, boy. Let me think. I mean, I think one One of the greatest mentors I think I've had is probably my grandpa. Growing up, I didn't really have a father figure in my life. However, he was around, and he, actually, as I reflect upon this entire episode, I see a lot of him. He was always a good example. He always, made a lesson out of something. I think part of the reason that I'm probably so affectionate with my wife and kids is because the way he was with me and the way I saw him with his own wife. I mean, from the day he passed away at 73 years old, I mean, he was still extremely affectionate with my grandma. I always told her how beautiful she was and hugged her and just just loved her. And I would say that was definitely a huge mentor of mine. But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably my most personal one.
Nice. Thomas, do you have some mentors that you've looked up to throughout the years that's helped you through parenting?
Well, my own father died when I was 9, and so I looked, to my brothers who are 11 and a half and 15 years older than I am, because they were sort of father figures during my childhood. My mother, I mean, you talk about male mentors, but my mother as the single parent who really took over and played both of those roles, took charge of a life that she had sort of been a passenger in before my father died, sort of skipping to now, without listing any names. I mean, I read so many articles about parenting and fatherhood and men, both that are published on the Good Men Project and other places, and I just look at all of these men who are amazingly courageous and amazingly vulnerable in the stuff that they write about their own experiences, and just how remarkable that is, that in a world where we still have these stereotypes that men are never supposed to show weakness and men are always supposed to be strong and we can't be emotional and all that, that how many of us are actually out there doing the opposite of that, showing the emotion, admitting the vulnerability, saying, I was depressed, I was this, I went through this low point, I lost my, whatever it is, and putting that out there so we can all learn from it.
Nice. Okay, Michael, what about you?
I look up to Thomas Pfeiffer. Wow, that was great. First of all, you mentioned vulnerability, and that needs to be a whole other show as well. I'm getting excited. This is a great show. Vulnerability, empowerment, those would be 2 great shows. I think that's huge. But people that I look up to, probably the biggest one from like a personal development family man kind of deal was Dr. Stephen Covey. When I read 7 Habits of the Highly Effective People, that book literally changed my life, and how I deal with myself and how I deal with the people in my life, personal growth, and that was kind of the stepping stone for me in moving out of my comfort zone and beginning to build a life. But yeah, Bill Cosby, like I said, I mean, these guys, it's like I'm passionate about being an agent of transformation, of change, and Stephen Covey always talked about be the change agent in your family. Like families go generation after generation after generation along a trajectory, right? And if you're not happy with that trajectory, you've got to be the person that shifts that trajectory. You've got to be the person to say, no, that's enough of that. That's enough of this non-vulnerability or this disempowerment or this mental or emotional abuse, this physical abuse. These things have to change, and they're going to change on my watch. And so that's one of the things that really moved me and got me thinking in that manner.
Awesome. Yeah, Stephen Covey was a big one for me too. John C. Maxwell was one that I really I loved reading his books and following. It was his what is it called? Developing the Leader Within You. I had to look at the title. I always forget because I saw the traits of a leader equal to that of a parent. So it's as a dad, knowing the type of dad that I wanted to be, I looked at the role models I had, and really my stepdad I couldn't have asked for a better stepdad. He was a great role model. But there were certain things I was like, okay, I liked how he did this, but I didn't like how he did that. As the child, I wish he would have done some of these things differently. So it was like, okay, so I want to change those things about myself, or not in my parenting style, right? So reading about leadership and personal growth helped me in that area, even though oftentimes we don't correlate those. So, but I think with that, unless anybody has a further comment, we're going to wrap it up and continue next week. Thanks for checking out the Modern Dad Council. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Please, if you have any questions, you have a comment, if you'd like to be the dad on the street next week, email me, chris@kickassdad.org. Thanks. See you next week.